Welcome to another Cliffs List webinar. And today my special guest is Chris Parker. Chris is a pickup artist, dating coach, call him what you will, who is based in New York and who has got some very good experience in dealing with women. And I think, there's going to be a lot of interesting information coming out of this discussion. I recently accompanied Chris on a boot camp, and I can tell you that he is very thorough. He's knowledgeable, experienced. I found the way that he broke down the events of the evening at the end, and as well as the after summary of the whole process, was really quite enlightening and quite advanced. I think I hadn't seen really anyone as follow up as much as he did on the boot camps. So Chris, maybe you can tell a little bit about yourself and to people who haven't heard about you and about your experience and this sort of thing, and then let's take it from there.
Yeah. Well, hey everyone. I'm Chris. I do live in New York. This is where I do the majority of my coaching. And although there will be future traveling around, world tours, and all that, it's pretty exciting stuff. But yeah, what I really, I guess, in a nutshell, how I got into this was I was kind of a guy with average results. I was always very social, fortunately, even though I was raised in a religious background where men and women, or guys and girls, weren't really, so it wasn't promoted on any level to be interacting with one another. And I guess because I always had a rebellious and more of a personality of I'm going to go find the information because clearly this is not working type of approach to life, I ended up going and finding, I started talking to girls. I started kind of changing my philosophy on life. And so so fortunately I started to lean into the direction, but I only really started getting into the, really getting my dating life handled when I was 21. I got my heart broken, my ass pretty much handed to me by a girl I was, I really cared about. And I was in that relationship because I really liked her, and I didn't know the next time I'd find a girl that I connected with on such a deep level, despite all the mistreatment that was going on, probably from both ends, to be honest. And so that's why I didn't leave. And then when I finally did get out of that and I hit the rock bottom, I pretty much swore that I was never going to get into another relationship unless it was a girl that I was confident was like super, very, very, very worth it. And I wouldn't stay in it if it no longer made sense. And that's essentially who I've trained myself to become. And that's how I like working, the type of guys I like working with as well, because I totally relate to it. So guys who I really like working with are guys who, have fair results, but they really just want to, get this area of their life handled. They want to date girls that they're very into physically, that they're physically attracted to, that they relate to, and build kind of like a higher quality lifestyle rather than, just bringing home and dating a whole bunch of girls that they're not so into to get experience. And I feel like, that's kind of my overall approach.
Well, how long have you been doing the coaching? And I guess tell us a little bit about your experience with that.
Yeah, so I started coaching very mildly about, I've been in this for probably close to about 4.5 years now, actively going out every night, night after night. And so probably, and even, daytime, sometimes very often both even, I was going out to, do this, to work on it. And I started to realize that there were a lot of people who were charging a lot of money for programs, even though, these people who were paying for them really didn't need the help that was so much required for such an expensive program. It was like they would have approach issues, but they would end up spending $2,000 to get their approach anxiety handled. So about a year and a half into it, I started coaching guys on just like approaching and building attraction. But at that point, I wasn't so familiar with, how to have multiple girls in my life, let's say. or how to bring girls home very, very quickly. It's nowhere near as efficient as it is now because I've been working on it for myself, finding out what works, what doesn't through my own experiences and other people's. So yeah, I started about 3 years ago actually coaching guys, and over time I just coached a little bit more here and there. This was, even today, it's not something that I'm actively trying to pursue forever, but I really put a lot of time into this, spent a lot of my own money, a lot of time into this, and it feels good at this point to be able to learn what actually works and see how different it is from what's often valued in the community or the advice that's often offered in the community, and be able to show a little bit of a different approach that's been working for me and that I've been able to, offer to other people as well, and be able to give them very, very similar results. So, and how that changed was back then, it was more about teaching them how to approach, build those really cool connections, getting those, being a little bit more assertive as a guy. So just learning how to just talk to girls that you wanted to speak to, nothing crazy. There was nothing ever, there was nothing ever offensive. It was just teaching guys how to be more assertive about what they wanted out of life, how to just, ignore their fear and just go after what they wanted. So I was learning this in college. I was learning this. I was approaching girls in my classes, girls on campus. But again, I was never like so crazy about it where, I was ever doing anything screwed up that would ever get me in trouble. Like I was just speaking to one of my clients a few minutes ago. He was telling me about how he's no longer allowed to approach girls in his university. It never got to that point. I always learned how to interact with these girls, and in a way that was mutually beneficial to both parties. And so now I've expanded from teaching guys how to have those types of relationships or those types of interactions to actually being able to bring those girls home, date them pretty quickly. And I guess where I really take pride in is that I teach guys how to meet these girls very, very quickly, create a very good impression because that's who you are, not just because that's how you're coming off, and to be able to create a really, really strong connection, lead the interaction forward, closer to sex, oftentimes in just a few hours, if even less very often, which will allow, as I say, for both the man and the girl to get exactly what they want, but in way less time. So the guy wants to date the girl, the guy's interested in her, and she's interested in a guy, not necessarily him just yet, until he's proven that he's actually, the type of guy that's really worth dating and keeping around and not letting go. And teaching the guy how to communicate all that in an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, just by like teaching them how to express themselves both physically, emotionally, going after, the approach, not being blown off so easily, showing a little bit of thick skin. So that's what I've taught guys how to do now, is not only just to be able to approach, not only to be able to speak to them, but to lead it in a direction that's helpful for both the guy and the girl, but in an hour, oftentimes even less. It's very, very cool stuff.
Why don't you give us a little bit of a further explanation on what sort of instructions you would give someone in order to move things along that quickly?
Yeah, so it depends on what exactly is what's holding him back. A lot of guys, when you actually get them to start approaching girls, they don't want to stay in the interaction. Those are typically not the guys I take on program, but I do help them. Those guys, what they have to really learn to do is to really desensitize themselves from interacting with people in general. If you don't have, with strangers, if you don't have that ability to just interact with strangers, that's what you got to work on. Past that ability to interact socially, what I would really say is you want to start focusing on the girls that you specifically like. So one of the common questions I'll get as an instructor is, should I focus on gathering a lot of experience with girls in general, like sexual experience, or with girls that I like? And my answer is always, you want to focus on the girls that you like on a sexual level, because those are the girls that count. Now, the reason why I would say it's important to learn how to just be social with people is because you're going to meet her friends. You're going to introduce her to your friends. Spend long enough time with someone. You need to learn how to be social. You're going to be in other situations. And if you don't know how to just be social, fun, you're going to lose that girl. So it's very important that you just know how to be overall social, comfortable in a social setting. And from there, I never recommend that a guy hits on a girl that he's not interested in. Like, you should only be flirting with girls that you're actively interested in pursuing. That means, a lot of things that I know go around in the community is like, I don't recommend going for reference experience makeouts, or you're sleeping with a girl that you're not interested in. You're wasting her time. You're wasting your time. It's not what you really want. It doesn't get you closer to the reason why most of us got in this, which is just to be more skilled, a much better guy for the women we want to attract. And so from there, I would say, once you're comfortable approaching those girls and staying in those interactions and forcing yourself to not leave, where even though it oftentimes you want to, because you feel uncomfortable, it's intimidating, it's new, it's an important, you get that this is one of those important times because she's your type, and instinctively it makes you want to avoid it. It's an important moment, it's a fight or flight response. And instead of fighting or flighting, you're just pushing yourself to stay. You're pushing yourself to learn how to deal with that situation. And past that, once you know how to speak to these girls, even on a social level, and then being a little even sexual, that you definitely want to grow into that sexual zone where you flirt with her, you tell her she looks sexy, you tell her you totally want to make out with her, things like that, where you're comfortable expressing the sexual side that you have for her. Then I would say it's very, very important to learn how to move it to the next direction. So asking her out on a date, asking her, when you finish the first date, asking her when you could see her again, things like that, like actively pushing yourself to create these relationships. If you want things like you just met her, and you want to have, let's say you want to bring her home that night, yeah, I definitely recommend creating a situation where you could actually bring that girl home that night by inviting her to your apartment in a way that doesn't make her uncomfortable, or that even if it makes her a little bit uncomfortable, you learn to make her comfortable with the new plan. So when I take my students out, one of the things I teach them is, look, you're going to invite her to your home. You're going to invite her out on a date. It's not always so straightforward, like, oh, do you want to go on a date? And the girl says, yeah. And then you just say, okay, well, let's do it. There's a lot of, uncertainty. She just met you. You need to give her really a lot of time to become comfortable with the idea of having any sort of relationship, socially, sexually, romantically, any of that. You need to give her time. So when you introduce the idea of her going home with you, going on a date with you, a lot of what I teach guys is expect some level of resistance, and that level of like, I don't know if that's a good idea. And it's because it's so new. It's kind of like what I talk to my friends about or my students about is kind of like if your friend ever randomly suggested going somewhere with you, saying, hey, do you want to, fly to Florida or whatever? It's like something, it's asking. You guys have a much higher level of comfort. And so that's why I'm kind of drawing a little bit of, I'm kind of like comparing the amount of investment that you would have with a person, if your friend was to say, hey, you want to fly to Florida, it's going to cost you $300. You're not as likely going to do it unless it made sense. If $300 was not money you normally spend. So when you meet a girl and you introduce the idea of going somewhere else with you, oftentimes you expect that she's not going to be fully prepared to say yes because she doesn't have enough information. But likewise with your friend, when he says, well, look, it's only $300 for the flight. The whole thing is $300. Or rather, the whole thing is $300. You'll be able to make it back to work on time. And he starts letting you know that what the plan is actually is a pretty good idea. You're going to start giving in. You weren't saying no because you were uncomfortable or because you have something against him. It was just you weren't familiar or comfortable with the idea that he was proposing. And same thing with the girl. So one of the things I tell guys is expect what you want to do is move the interaction forward by either holding her hand and expect her to be a little bit like, I don't know if this is a good idea. And then you just, as a guy who's very, very well intentioned, who would never, ever do anything to hurt her, understand that it's going to take her a little bit of time to become used to it. So just kind of prime her for that. Say, hey, look, I totally want to ask you out, or I totally want to take you out, and expect that she might say, I don't know. I mean, we just met, or how do I know you're not a weirdo? Like, expect that, because it's totally normal. And if you don't get that, you either are so freaking cool, or, or she's not, as cautious. It's a very normal thing, especially in today's world, to be a little bit cautious, a little bit skeptical. And so you're just being very, very empathetic to her situation and catering to it. And giving her basically what she needs to feel comfortable so that you both can have what you want.
One of the things that I've gathered from a lot of what you've said and what I've read is that, handling objections is probably one of the top obstacles, I guess, in having any kind of success with women.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm curious on like some of the more common ones that you run into. What have you learned from experience that works better than other things, for example?
Yeah. So so it sounds like the question is what would I say is like kind of a strategy or approach, kind of a method for handling a girl's objections when you propose moving it forward. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So just to explain, because we got a little bit technical there, the whole thing is that, so what we in the community, or at least among the people I know are really good about, in this area, is it's a sales term. When you introduce the idea of, hey, do you want to buy my product? Or, hey, do you want to go out? Hey, do you want to do something? There's going to be what's called an objection. That's a sales term. And really what an objection is, it's a question. It's a concern. It means is this going to be a problem? I'm okay with the idea, but is this going to be a problem? And once you show them it's not going to be a problem, then it's, then you more or less should be good to go. Now, one of the more common objections that you'll get is, for example, if you ask a girl to leave her friends and come hang out with you alone, right? Let's say you're out and she's with her girlfriends, and you approach her and she just, she's like, hey, I'm going to go back to my friends. You're like, well, hey, I actually live pretty close by. Why don't we go get some drinks? Where we could actually talk outside of the craziness of the bar or the club or the lounge, the fundraiser, whatever, wherever you are, assuming you do live close by. You're introducing that idea, and one of the more common concerns she's going to have is, I'm here with my friends. I don't know if that's a good idea. And in her mind, she's thinking, well, I don't want to ditch my friends. I like you, but I don't want to ditch my friends. It's the most common thing you're going to get, because she's a normal person who's considerate, probably. She's also, it's also sometimes just her way of saying, look, I'm not ready to do that with you without trying to come off impolite. So the best way to handle something like that is, well, for one, realize that it's going to be there very, very often when you ask a girl to come somewhere with you. It doesn't mean she doesn't like you. It purely she's not making up an excuse in most cases. She's purely just concerned about, well, I don't want to ditch my friends. And that means a number of things. Like, if I come with you, how do I get back to my friends? Excuse me, I don't necessarily want to spend hours with you. It could also mean like she doesn't want to leave her friends. So maybe you should invite her friends too. So the best way to really handle a situation like that is to understand her situation and let her know that it's not going to be a problem. So if she says, I'm here with my friends, let her know, hey, well, we're not going to be gone long. You'll still be able to get plenty of time with your friends. You could ask her if she's still not so okay with leaving by herself, which again is pretty normal. She just met you. most probably, at least in the context that I'm talking about. You have to realize that if she's not willing, if you want to hang out with her and she's not willing to bring her, to leave her friends, you have to figure out how many friends she really wants to bring. Maybe she's just there with her sister and she doesn't want to leave without her sister, but the rest of them, they don't even live in the same area as her. It's not a big deal. Or they do live in that area, but she doesn't. And it's only important for her to bring the sister. So it's important to ask those questions like, well, how many people are you here with that you need to bring? And she says, oh, I'm here with my sister. And you say, fine. So let's go get your sister and we'll go get some drinks and we'll come back soon whenever you guys are ready. And, so the whole thing is understand her situation and explain to her how what you're proposing as a plan doesn't conflict at all. It doesn't, it's not an issue at all. And so that's what I would recommend. Another one would be, let's say, I'm trying to think, let's say you invite her to come hang out with you. And she says, well, look, I mean, where are we going? I don't want to go far. You're going to want to explain, well, we're not going that far. And ideally you shouldn't be going far. If you're going out trying to, date a whole bunch of girls, you should be living in an area where it's conducive to meeting those girls. You don't want to live 2 hours away. I mean, you're never going to see those girls again. It's just like logistically not, how many people just off of meeting that first night end up in a long-term relationship or a long-distance relationship, long-term relationship. It doesn't happen that often. You want to put yourself in a situation where it's convenient for these girls that you meet to see you again, to spend time with you. And so, if you live far, my recommendation for you would be, maybe bring out your car and say, well, hey, we're not going too far. It's about a 20-minute drive or whatever it is. And say, look, and, we'll go hang out. And whenever you guys are ready to leave, I'll drive you wherever you need to go, or I'll get you a cab. You really want to make her understand that you're not, her hanging out with you doesn't have downsides. It's okay. And that she'll be fine. And, worst case scenario, if it's like if it's too far, or if you're going to be too far, yeah, I mean, it's just something you want to make sure is to live close by to them, close by to those areas you're going to meet them. Those I would say are the biggest ones, like how far are we going? What are we going to be doing there? And you want to fill her in with some information. So what are we going to be doing there? It's like if you're meeting her at night, a lot of girls like to drink. So you could say, well, hey, we could go have some drinks, or it depends on the kind of girl you meet. I like to spend a lot of time with girls who I think are smart. So I love like saying, hey, I would love to show you my bookcase, because the truth is, if I show a girl my bookcase and if she likes it, I know that there's going to be some level of chemistry there, and it also puts us in a situation where where something sexual could happen, assuming we're both comfortable,
Well, the objections you're talking about are almost just logistical, whereas
Yeah.
what happens when you have like a student, for example, who maybe doesn't encounter the same kind of response, and their objections are a little bit more base level? For example, the girl's maybe not attracted to the guy or something like that, whereas, those are a different objection to just, well, what are we going to do at your place? Like she's already saying, well, I'll consider it. You're obviously a candidate for her to go with.
Yeah, sure. So how do you get to that point where she's even interested in hanging out with you?
Well, I'm just saying that, let's say you've got a student that has that problem. I mean, you may not have that issue. I mean,
Yeah.
so somebody else who does, maybe doesn't have the experience and the fluidity of social graces.
Yeah, and I'll answer your question in a second, but actually what you said before is why I don't think there's a massive difference between like the daytime and the nighttime, which a lot of people say. I think you will deal with a little bit of different issues, but again, at the end of the day, all it is problem solving. In many cases, you're gonna have. I think the harder part about the daytime is just being able to get her attention a little bit, because she's not in a very social headspace. Whereas at night she's been drinking, she's a little bit more, socially like lubricated, in a more of a talking momentum. But otherwise, it's more or less the same thing after you have her attention. how would I recommend getting a student to the point where if he's not speaking, where if he's not getting her attention, and at least in a, like, first of all, in a social way, but definitely in a sexual way. Yeah, I mean, you got to realize I get also the same type of responses very often. There's things that I do to minimize those responses. And that's what I would teach a student to do, which is, for one, how he approaches the girl, how he speaks. So, I mean, everyone in the community knows this. Like, there's the upward tonality and the downward tonality. When you approach a girl and you're like, hey, like, how's your night going? You know, and it kind of sounds like you're talking to her like she's a baby. You know, like, you talk to a baby like that, like, hey, little guy, like, you liking your day? Are you having fun? Did you get a toy? And no one likes to be talked like that besides kids, maybe, you know? So learning to speak to her in a way where it doesn't sound like you're treating her like an infant or like you're kissing her ass, that's huge. That is a big way that a lot of guys instantly start getting ignored. It's because it's kind of annoying. It's like, you know, why can't you speak to me normally? It's either there's something wrong with me or there's something wrong with you, and no one automatically wants to assume, you know, very often for a lot of people, what they do in general is we like to place blame. So when something goes wrong, we don't say it's our fault. So she's not going to say, oh my God, I was being so awkward there. Very often she's going to say, oh, that guy was weird. You know, unless she liked the guy and he proved enough value, and then she's going to say, oh man, I was being so weird. So how would I get them to that point? I would say, for one, you know, the tonality is important. The way, I think body language is also a huge one. If you believe in evolutionary psychology at all, they say, you know, 90% of communication is, you know, your body language, your tone of voice. We didn't have words for a long period of time. So what her brain is pinging off of is, you know, how are you leaning into her space? How are you touching her? You know, things like that, less so your words. So I would teach a guy, for one, don't like lean into her space, because, you know, especially because what it's going to lead her to do is back up a little bit, and that's not helpful for you to back up. So what I would say, one way to do it is to teach guys how to pull girls into their space. So I'll teach guys to take the girls' hands and put them on, you know, on their shoulders, things like that. Where it kind of invites the girl to participate rather than you kind of going into her space, you putting your arms on her. I think when you do things like that so quickly, it kind of overwhelms people. Like, why are they touching me? You know, they could take your hands off, but it oftentimes is a little bit weirder than if you had her hands on you and she could just pull them off. Gives her a little bit more of a sense of control. But if I was also going to tell them, look, if they wanted to know how to touch the girl, I would say, well, build up to it. So, you know, maybe give her a high five or like hold her wrist and look at her rings, you know, something like that. Make just a stupid comment, whatever. It's not, the point is just to get her comfortable with you touching her. Then I would say, you know, maybe go in for a friendly hug. And then I would say, you know what, maybe then take her hands, put them on you, like get her a little bit more comfortable with the idea of touching you instead of going for it all at once. It's asking for a lot all at once when she just met you. These are really great ways to help get the girl comfortable with being in each other's space, especially in a sexual way. And then from there, that's when I would say is, you know, as you also pointed out, is that's when you're going to start getting those objections. If you're not at that where she's going to say, oh, I don't know, I'm here with my friends, or I just met you, I can't kiss you, things like that. You got to expect that that's going to happen because they're totally normal responses. Yeah. And that's why I was saying it's very important. Like if you can't even get to that, that's where it's important, just pushing your comfort zone to being social in general, than being, you know, somewhat like flirtatious with the girls you like. You got to learn to do all that. It's a step by step, you know. It wouldn't make sense, as they say, and, you know, just as pointed out many times, you're never going to step on the basketball court and know how to dunk. It's not normal. So what you do is you just learn to dribble, and then you learn to, you know, take a close shot, and then then you take a farther step back and another step back and try to score those baskets. And, you know, then you go for more complicated layup and et cetera. And it's not going to happen all at once. And the funny thing is, no one differentiates it like that. there's some, for whatever, I think it's just purely social conditioning, honestly. But for whatever reason, people feel the need to be really good with the opposite sex. And it's really not that important. I mean, if you want to do it, great, do it. But it's not that important. You don't need to learn how to be good with women in general. Most guys, if we spent enough time with girls in general, we would meet a girl or two that we liked. Spend more time at the gym, read, like learn to become just an average type of person with girls, and you'll have a decent amount of options, as long as you put yourself in a situation to speak to them. But you don't need to learn how to go out with girls night after night, several different girls. If you want, there's ways, and guys like myself, other people teach that. But you don't need to learn to do that. It's just if you want to. So if you want to, again, the whole simple, like the way you do it is slowly desensitize yourself from going on a social level, then being a little bit more flirtatious, again, with the girls that you like, not girls that you don't like. Those girls, it's not in your overall long-term result that you desire to become good with girls you're not interested in. So focus on those girls, and focus on pushing yourself to, let's say if you're afraid to ask them out, focus on saying, look, you know what, the next time I meet a girl that I like, I'm never going to not ask her out again. I'm going to ask her out. I'm going to ask her for a number. I'm going to ask her to see me that week. And interestingly enough, a big part of becoming skilled in this, if you do want to take it to the elite level, is learning how to go for it, make mistakes, and then course correct. And the whole thing is, you kind of need to get to the point very often where you make such stupid mistakes, such big mistakes, where it's almost like you swear to yourself you will never do that again. And we've all had those moments. I know guys like Tony Robbins talks about them. He calls them breakthroughs, where you just realize, like, what the hell was I doing? We've all had moments like those, even outside of the context of becoming skilled with women. But let's say you've dated one type of girl and you hated the way she treated you, like I did, and you come to the point where you draw a line. You say, I'm never ever going to that situation again. And maybe you will, but I'm telling you, there's only so many times you're going to let that happen. In most cases, I mean, there are, we're just speaking generally. There's always going to be an exception, but yeah, it's a lot of pushing yourself to do well with the girl that you want, and screwing up so much that it's you never make those mistakes again. You never forget to ask for the phone number. You don't pass up those approaches. You do notice that she's into you, and then invite her to your apartment. Things like that, where even in the context of a relationship, you do realize that you got upset at your girlfriend for no reason at all, and she means a lot to you, and you just say, look, babe, I'm so sorry I did that. I feel horrible. You really matter to me, and you know what? I'm not. I don't ever want to do that again. I'm really, really sorry. Things like that. Like, you're just gonna make mistakes as a human being over time, and if you want to improve, catch them. And the smaller the mistake that you could kind of make it into a big deal in your mind that you will never make that mistake again, the more of the smaller details that you'll be correcting. But I do think there are the 80-20 rules that apply, where 20, if you get out, let's say 20% of your mistakes, you're going to solve 8 of the bigger mistakes. You're going to solve 80% of your problems, and that's for one, like approaching, telling the girl you're interested in her, being a little bit physical with her, nothing over the top, unless you're very, very skilled and that you could tell that the girl's going to be comfortable with it. So yeah, and that's kind of what I like to teach, is teaching guys like the 20% of the things you need to do really, really well, and you'll get those 80% of those results, rather than what I feel like actually what inspired me to get into coaching a little bit, even though I didn't need to. It's not like it's not like I ever wanted to be a dating coach. It was that what I felt was I figured this stuff out because I wanted to learn it, and 80% of what the information that's offered seems to only get about 20% of the results. And meanwhile, it's taking guys years and years and years and that's if they make it those years, And so, if they don't, they end up walking away being like, you know what, fuck, I'll never be good at this. And really what it is just, you got to change your approach. There's plenty of guys who are getting good at this. And for every for every guy who's saying he can't do it, there's another guy just like him that's doing it. And you could say they're an anomaly, or you could say, and find that as an excuse to not do it, or you could say, you know what, it's possible, and I'm going to try to do it too. And if he could do it, I could do it. I had a Skype session the other day with somebody who said, look, it turns out we actually know each other from, my upbringing was like, we have a lot of mutual friends. And he was saying, look, I don't get how you're so good at this and I'm not, when we had the same background. And it's not that it's not that I'm any different. It's that I'm just doing different things because I've trained myself over and over and over again to do it. And I've wondered a lot of times, like, do I really just want it, or to go out night after night after screwing up over and over again? Does that make me insane? I don't know. But at the end of the day, it's gotten me the results. So, you could, like, if it matters to you and you really want to get it down, there's a way. And it's really, it's not, no one, I really think there's probably a very small minority of guys that could do it, whereas the majority of guys think they can't do it. And that's just purely all self-doubt. And just to bring up one point about self-doubt, I was reading a book recently, and they were saying about how there was a study at Harvard where they would ask the students that were freshmen to raise their hands in the I forget what the term is, but when you first come to school, and they collect everyone and they start announcing, what the semester is going to be like, etc. They asked them to raise their hand if they thought they were the one person that got in by accident. And the majority of the class, the students raised their hand and thought they were the one person that got in by mistake. We all underestimate what we're actually able to do. It's self-doubt. You just got to train yourself to ignore it, and that you could do it. So that was kind of like answering your question on the psychological level. The first part was more on an actionable level.
All right. Well, let me ask you this, because I did notice in the time we spent together that, you have some ideas and concepts and things, I think, that are either refinements or original from, what other people are teaching. Maybe you can tell us a little bit of some of those things that differentiate you from, what someone might learn elsewhere.
Yeah. So a big thing that I like guys to realize is that, it doesn't take that much work to get this done. You don't, and for one, you don't need to be the biggest one that blew my mind was, you don't need to be that cool to get really great results. And if I had to guess why, it's because, all you have to do is have a base level of being able to interact with people. You need to be able to be in a conversation. You need to have the capacity in you to just tell a girl that you're interested in her. You don't need to be, again, like I said, you don't need to be able to like make out with a girl right off the open. So what I like to teach guys is showing them that they could do this very, very early on. They don't need to spend 4 years learning how to be the coolest guy ever before they start bringing girls home, bringing girls into their life. You don't need that. Again, the cooler you are, the more often you'll have those options, and they'll come from everywhere. You'll be joking around the barista at Starbucks, and all of a sudden she wants to hang out with you. You'll just learn to be a very fun person. But you don't need to be a very, very fun person. A very, very fun person, a very confident person, a very charismatic person for a girl to be interested in you. I mean, you really don't. Sex is totally normal. There's so many people in today's world that, the more alpha you are, great. But, there's so many. You don't need to be the most alpha guy anymore. It's not like that. No one's threatening your life. There's so many options. And all you really need to learn how to do is to talk to the girl, to make her feel comfortable with your plans, and when that comes back to the answering objections topic we talked about before, and then leading her toward the next step. You're home on a date. You gotta realize, again, you're introducing a new idea, and then you got to make her feel comfortable with that idea, and then you just got to lead her toward along the plan. How cool do you need to be? Like, you don't need to be the funniest guy in the world. You don't need, to be the most charismatic guy for her to do that. But then again, the more charismatic you are, the more people are going to want to go along with the plan. So I would say, like, that's what I really like teaching guys is you don't need to be that cool. I like teaching them to be cool, but I also want guys to realize, look, you could date girls just the way you are, even if you don't read every self-help book, even if you don't hit the gym 5 times a week. You don't need to become this whole person just for girls to like you. And that's kind of comes back to the like, I guess one of the first concepts we've developed is that you need to get girls off that pedestal, that they're not anything, they're not something, it's not like Harvard, like you don't need to be like a genius, to get it. Like, it's not that big of a deal for a girl to like you. You don't need to be the best guy all the time for every, to get laid. Like, it's not something prestigious to have sex. It's not something like a trophy. It's it's normal. Everyone does it, or most people do. And that's what I like teaching guys, again, is you could do it. It's not that big of a deal. The better you want to become, you have, the more option you want to be able to attract, you're going to have your work cut out for you, and I would say that those are the biggest, that's my favorite thing to teach guys, really, and to teach them that they could do it pretty early on, that, to bring girls back is really takes 10 minutes, doesn't mean they're hooking up with you in 10 minutes, but they're willing to go with you oftentimes in 10 minutes to your home. And when we were on the program, when we were out together, you saw, I remember we were together, and I mean, I approached these girls within 5 minutes. We were walking out of the venue, and it was just nothing crazy. I mean, I didn't lift them up and spin them around and, throw out a list of lines and funny things and, bring girls into the interactions, or as we call, like, merging sets. Like, I didn't do any of that. And, on a more broader explanation is that there's a really big difference between learning pickup and getting laid. Very, very big difference. You're not trying to create impressions. You're not trying to keep her attracted for a very, very long period of time. You're just trying to get to a base level where you're both comfortable with each other socially and sexually, romantically, and then lead her to your home. If you ever read anything about, like, sales or marketing, which I'm sure you have, one of the things they say is a lot of guys a lot of companies spend a lot of time trying to, sell their products when they completely ignore the ability, like, making the purchasing process easier. They don't have multiple financing options. They don't have a very easy way to go online and, very easily see how to buy the product. Like, they spend so much time advertising it, but they don't actually make it easy for them to buy. And that's what I like showing guys is, stop spending 2 hours trying to convince her that you're cool or that she should hang out with you. Speak to her, get her interested, explain to her that you're, that whatever you want to do is actually it's a fucking awesome idea. And then make it easy for her to come home. So instead of spending 6 hours a night out, maybe spend a few more hours working on your finances so you can live in a better neighborhood. These are things that I like teaching guys. Like, focus on solving, focus on making it easier for yourself in the long term. Make it easy for her to comply. Make it easier for her to want to come over. We have girls all the time who are in the area. They come out and, they'll ask me if they could crash by me. They'll ask if they could meet up with me at the end of the night. Like, what do I care? For me, I get to go out with my friends, and later on they come over and they sleep over, and I've set my life up where it's so convenient for everyone to want to hang out with me. And then, to add to that, I'm really, I can be very, very fun. I make it enjoyable for people to be around with me, as well as make it easy for them I make myself very accessible, if that makes sense.
I think my question though was more what, like I think you've given more of a explanation of how you approach it. I was kind of like looking for something more about your distinctions between what you are showing somebody and somebody else teaching what you're teaching.
So technical.
Yeah.
Okay. So on a technical level, what I like to teach guys is, seeding the pull early on. So what that means is very, very early on in the in the interaction, to introduce the idea of them going home with you, and to really make it solid in their minds that they're going home with you, or they're going at least somewhere else with you than where you're initially staying. And how that differs is, a lot of guys, what they do is, if they, I had one person I spoke to the other day, and he was telling me he screwed up on pulling the girl. And so I guess, that's again what I teach is the pull very often. He screwed up, and when I started asking him about it, he was saying, well, he went to go to the coat check and to get his coat. The girl didn't want to come with him, but then when he came back, she didn't want to leave. And I asked him to walk me through it. I asked him, okay, well, how did you introduce the idea of you guys leaving? And he said he never did. And it's,
There we are.
yeah, hey, not sure what happened.
Yeah, well, we'll just edit that. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Yeah, cool. So when I was talking to this client of mine, he was telling me about this experience he had with a girl who, in his understanding, the girl was supposed to come home with him. And when he went to go get his coat and came back and the girl wouldn't leave with him, he thought he fucked up on that the girl no longer was interested in leaving with him. And the reality of it was, he never even brought it up to her. He may have passively said, hey, so we're going to go. Okay. I'm going to get my coat. We'll leave. But she never agreed. She never even probably understood that she was part of the plan of, going anywhere. So I teach my students to really get it in the girl's mind that they're leaving. And I teach them to get it in their mind very, very, very early on. So this way, very similarly to how we teach guys to make the interaction romantic early on. So this way, when you go for the kiss or go for her number, it's not a total surprise that you're interested in her. Same thing. You're introducing the idea that you want to leave with her. early on. So this way, it's not a total surprise when you actually go to try to, then you actively go to bring her home. So early on, you'll say things like, hey, I actually live close by. I want to, have a few drinks. I want you to come with me. And so expecting that she will probably say no, not always, but expecting that it will happen, or rather that, and if it doesn't happen, great. And then being prepared for it, and then making her feel comfortable. So explaining, she's going to say, oh, I'm here with my friends, I can't leave. And you're going to say, well, look, don't worry, we're going to be back in 20 minutes. Your friends won't even, care that we're gone. They're doing their own thing. We'll be right back. And then if she's still not ready, just continuing to vibe with her, because clearly, she's not ready to leave with you. So you just continue to vibe with her. If that's the real issue, sometimes there's actually a different issue, and you say, what? So if that's the only reason is because you think your friends, because your friends aren't going to be okay with it. And if she says, yeah, then you say, okay, no problem. And then you just, for one, you could go get their friend's permission. That's a very easy way to handle that. But you could also continue to vibe with her, where she's, a little bit more willing to take a risk with you, like that. Whereas, kind of like she would with her boyfriend. So, she would be willing to sneak off with her boyfriend. If you guys have that, type of interaction going as well with the girl, it's gonna be easier for her to comply. And another advantage to inviting her back with you early on is what I teach guys is every single thing you do to move the interaction forward, if she's interested in at all, is going to turn her on. She's going to think, wow, he's taking my hand. He must really like me. He's trying to kiss me. Wow, he's into me. And she might not go for it right away. But the fact that you're going for it, and you're going for it with her, and it's clear to her that you're not necessarily just trying to hook up with any girl, it's really going to make her feel excited. Even if she could tell that you do that every night, as long as when you're with her, she's having a good time, and you're not making her feel like, you're just a dumb girl. And if you left, I wouldn't, like you have no respect for her at all. It's more or less going to make her feel pretty turned on. In most cases, it will. So that, coming back to, coming out of the longer explanation, the whole thing is teaching them very, very early on, where you're inviting that girl to go somewhere else with you. You're kind of inviting her on, as they say in the community, an insta date right then. And then when knowing that she might not necessarily be comfortable, and then handling her discomfort, making her very, very happy to go with you. That's what I would say.
Well, let me ask you about general conversation. For the most part, I think the approach is to just sort of say anything and not worry about what you're saying to a woman. And, that's sort of fine, I guess, when you're basically a cool guy. But I think if you get a guy who's on your boot camp, I guess, for the first time, and he's shy and he's socially awkward or something or other, it takes a little bit of work to get him to a point where he's expressing himself in a manner where he's getting some kind of positive reaction, I would think.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right that we teach these guys to learn to say whatever they want, not whatever they want, like you don't care if you don't care if you offend her, not say whatever you want that fuck what everyone thinks. It's more of say whatever you want and trust that what you have to say she's going to like, because you're a well-intentioned guy. You're not trying to offend her. You're not trying, so why would talking about your job, why would talking about how your day went be something wrong to say? You're also not trying to impress her. So why would talking about what you want to talk about be a bad thing? There are more helpful topics than others. And that's why, for example, there's a difference between being socially, speaking to her on a social level and speaking to her on a flirtatious level. And so that there's different ways to do that. But yeah, and it totally is a difficult thing. And that's why my favorite guys to take on program are, I like taking most guys on program in general, but my favorite guys to take on program are those guys that, they're cool guys. They know how to have a conversation. They're fine. I could speak to them about my life. They could talk about their life. It's not like we have these long silences where the whole time he's intimidated by me and doesn't know what to say in general to anyone. It's the guys who are already comfortable speaking. They're just normal guys, but they just don't know how to sleep with these girls. They don't know how to attract them. They know how to. Oftentimes, they even know how to attract them. They don't realize they do. The girls like them, but it doesn't go anywhere because they didn't move it anywhere. Yeah, it's definitely a much harder skill set to know how to, connect with someone, to be free flowing. And to give some tips for those guys that are listening, I would say a big thing is to learn how to say whatever you want. Like, just say something and in your mind, really reinforce it in your mind. It's going to take practice, but think, damn, that was awesome. Like, really, and expect that in the beginning. Again, it's so new to you. Even for you, it's going to seem weird and you're going to doubt it. And you just trust that it's awesome. Just say, look, even think to yourself, look, I know I don't believe that right now, but it's true. It's true. Chris Parker has gotten a lot of results and he's trained a lot of guys, and it's true. He's saying what I have to say is true. I don't even need to know what you have to say. As long as you're not trying to actively piss everyone off, you're not walking around calling girls dogs, things like that. You're not trying to offend anyone. You're totally, what you have to say, there's nothing wrong with it at all. So learn to teach yourself that what you have to say is totally fucking awesome. And there's no reason it would not be awesome. It's simple conversation. Like, who's to even judge if it's good enough? You don't even know this girl. If she doesn't like it right away, so what? So teach yourself that no one, if anyone's going to be the judge about if what you have to say is cool, it should be you, because you're going to be listening to yourself speak for a very long time. It's most important that you like what you have to say more than this girl who has to listen to you for 2 seconds if it doesn't work out, And then the other thing I would say, that's just kind of on a value scale, on a relatability, a comfort scale, is like I was telling the students on the program that you were with me on, is teaching them to talk about what's important to them. Talk about what excites you. So if you don't care what she does for work, don't ask. If you're just trying to see if she, let's say you happen to like girls who produce music or whatever, are creative, you like those kinds of girls, ask her what she does. If she says she's a lawyer, and that's a deal breaker for you, or that her personality is probably not in alignment, it's important. Maybe that's important. Excuse me. That's just an example of why it might be important. If it's not important, don't ask. Ask her things that are important. So ask her things that matter to you, and ask her things that you think even matter to her. So one of my favorite questions to ask girls are like, when they lost their virginity, was it a good experience? Who was their first, like, how they meet their first boyfriend, was, have they had long-term relationships? Were they generally good? I'll tell them about my relationships. Like, these are questions people don't often ask, and they're so fucking important to us. They are important. They are a big part of, who we become. So, if I were to ask you something that you've done 1,000 times and ask you, how was your, like, 412th time, you're not going to fucking know. But if I were to ask you, how was your first time? How was the last time? How was, your starts and your finishes very often are where people really, where it means something. That, so ask her those questions. Ask her, how did it feel when she finished college? Like, was she terrified? A lot of people are. They start to realize that what they've done until now doesn't necessarily, they're out on their own. It's not like I got good grades and now I'm made for life. It's like you actually have to continue working hard, trying to find someone to hire you. It's scary for a lot of people. Ask her about that, Ask her about how many siblings she had and if she got along with them. Like, these are things that matter to us on a deep emotional level, So ask her more interesting questions. And another thing I would say is, instead of talking about the what, talk about the why. So talk about, instead of just saying, I liked Brazil, explain to her why. You could say, for me, it was so awesome because I've only been to Europe and I've only been to America. And when I went to Brazil, it was like there was such a level of familiarity that's so uncommon for areas like New York, or, I feel like areas like Europe, they're kind of a little bit closed-minded, and so when I was there, I felt like everyone there was my cousin or my family member. It was really, really nice to feel so welcome. Mind you, I'm totally making that up. I don't, I've never been to Brazil. So, but these are things like, talk about what's important. Talk about even why it's important. You could say, why going to Brazil and feeling welcomed is important. You could say, look, it was so refreshing because when I live in New York, a lot of people don't want to talk to each other. Sometimes even when I ask for directions, you could tell people are like, they just want to brush you off, and all you needed was a little bit of help. And when I went there, full conversation to find out who this person is and let them know who I am and feel heard and feel understood and understand somebody else. And people get that. Most things that we all go through or that we go through, everyone else has gone through. We all could, in many cases, identify. It's not on the what we identify very often. We all went to most of us went to different colleges. Most of us grew up in different places, but we've all moved and felt the excited and terrified feeling of having a new beginning. We've all had breakups, so we've all had good breakups and bad breakups, and talk about, what we could all really relate to is on the emotional level of what it all meant to us. We all, in that sense, are very often the same. No one wants to feel judged. Most people want to be loved. Like, those things aren't going away for most people. And those are things that I think are really good to hit on. So, yeah, I love teaching guys things like that, but they are a little bit more of a craft. And once you could actually do that, even on a base level, it's very easy to convert those girls into, like your sex partner, your girl maybe in a rotation that you have going, or a girlfriend. It's so much easier to do that than to teach a guy, the whole conversational patterns and where he screwed up. And that I feel takes a long time to develop because, guys who generally don't have the social skills are a little bit more emotionally shut down. They've reserved their emotions. They haven't shared them. And so they have to learn to share them. And once you could do that on a base level, you could just speak to the girl. It's not that much harder to explain to the girl, hey, we're going somewhere else. What is that, 5 words? Hey, we're going somewhere else. 5 words, not that hard. It's very different than teaching you how to have a whole conversation, On that, I could give you principles. I could give you some exercises, but it's not as, straightforward. And so what a lot of guys do is a lot of instructors do is they teach them how to have these conversations for hours on end, which is so helpful in the long run. But if you don't know how to convert it, how helpful is that? You have a lot of great conversations that go nowhere. You never found out that the girl, lives in another country, or you found that out, but you didn't realize and weren't really honest with yourself that interaction isn't going anywhere in the long term. So maybe you should cut that interaction short if you're trying to meet a girl and that you can make something work with. Cut that interaction short and say, hey, let's stay in touch over Facebook or WhatsApp. But I'm gonna let you go. It was awesome talking to you, and then go meet a girl that you actually do have a chance of making it work. So, and that's also another thing I teach is most of this is really just the logistics. Like once you can have a basic conversation, it's figuring out where those obstacles are that you won't be able to overcome. And if they are overcomable, or at least you think they might be overcomable, find out how overcomable they are early on, so it's not a problem later on, in the context of bringing a girl home, one of the new ones that we found out over the last, let's say year, maybe 6 months was, you definitely want to know that the girl lives in a situation where she could bring you home without feeling judged, or her roommates or family members won't throw you out. And so you want to find that out early on. But one thing we also found out, and we only found this out by screwing up, was even if they have an Airbnb, one of the questions you want to find out Is she able to bring guests back there, or because sometimes they rent out a room, right? And so they can't bring guests back. And if your goal was to sleep with that girl and she wanted to sleep with you, and you never found out whether you could actually bring her in, whether you could actually go inside, you just wasted a lot of time, And if she has an Airbnb, she's probably not from the area, and you probably won't see her again, And so these are things like looking out for where the landmines are, looking out for the situations where things could go wrong, and handling them as soon as possible and effectively.
In terms of conversations, I when I spent some time with you, there was we had a discussion which I thought was very relevant and very insightful, and I wanted to get into that really right now, because basically your method in a lot of ways was an offshoot of leading them, and you talk about what you want to talk about. That's the important thing, is you talk about what you want to talk about, and don't sort of let her sort of rule the conversation, is sort of the way that you were doing things. And you sort of brought that up, and that occurred to me that's very different in a lot of ways, one from most of the ways that I've been brought up, which was mostly to be a good listener.
Yeah.
And obviously I think that you need both in order to be successful in conversing and communicating and connecting with people. But I think that there's also an observation that you have a lot of guys who are call them the alpha males, or there are guys who are very forceful and very real bad boys, and these guys are loud and obnoxious, and you often see them with a lot of the hot women, like biker gangs, and these guys are like these women are attracted to that. And I think there's a element of the of leading that I think you've extracted without being obnoxious, that I think is really a very useful and critical and important thing to have developed. And I guess maybe if you have some comments on that to add to what I just said.
Yeah, so I would say very, very early on, it's important that you lead the conversation more, so you talk about yourself, you talk about her, you ask as little of her in the beginning as possible, really. Allow her to get hooked on like your value as a person. And once she's hooked on you, it's a much better time to start asking questions and listen to her. Let her share who she is, but you kind of need to get her into the mode of where she even wants to share what she has to, or what she has with you. And I think a great way to do things like that is to start conversation or statement or question, comment statements, saying things like I, starting with I, or you, right? So if you were to say, you look awesome in that dress, right? That's something from you, that's from something you're saying to her. I think that's a great thing to say. If you were to say, you look awesome in that dress, I love this, I hate that, I've never been here before, you look lost, you look like you're ready to party, things like that. Talking about what you and her, talking about your who you are, talking about who she is or how she's coming off, etc., etc. I think those are great in the beginning. Later on, you're going to want to ask questions. You're going to want to listen more. You don't even have to ask questions. There's very great ways where you could even elicit information from the girl without asking questions. And so, but that's really what you want, is for you to demonstrate so much to her. And we're talking, again, this is more about like being very, very cool rather than, getting laid. Learning how to be a very cool person to speak to overall. So if you're going to try to learn how to do that, it's very important for you to demonstrate who you are, what her time with you will be like, and what what she could expect from hanging out with you, the types of things you have to say, and it gives her the ability to also speak. It makes her comfortable. It lets her know about who her audience is, what she could say. So, for example, it's kind of in a funny way. It's kind of like saying, you know, I thought I should let the girl go for the kiss. And the truth is, it's kind of your responsibility as a guy to go for the kiss. And when you do it, she might not even kiss you. She might give you the cheek, but you're letting her know while you're with her that while she's with you in the context of your relationship, it's okay for you guys to be sexual. It's okay for her to kiss you. It's okay for her to go for the kiss. Like, you're showing her what's okay. You're dictating the reality and the frame of the interaction of what's all right to happen. And if you're letting her lead the conversation, you're letting her dictate what's okay. And then you're playing by her rules. And very often her rules are not very helpful. And if you think about one of the reasons why is because she has to deal with, let's say, a lot of things like not looking like a slut, right? And now you have to live by her rules of when it's okay and when it's not okay, as opposed to just making her feel like there's no judgment. When you're with me, you're going to be fine. No one's going to fuck with you. I will never judge you. I'm going to respect you. And again, I don't, and you and I talked about this too. Like, there is being the nice part, like being nice about all these things, letting her know it's okay, letting her know I'm not going to disrespect you, letting you know, look, if I say I'm going to call you, I'm going to call you, without ever coming off like a total bitch. And one of the examples that I gave with you guys that I had, I think it was like the day before, was I went out on a date with a girl, and I guess I had to specify I was with a girl. I went out on a date, and we were at the Starbucks, and this girl was really warming up to me. She kind of came there in a bad mood. We made friends with this gay guy who was next to us. I befriended him too. He really liked me as well. And then the barista there, she knows me and she really likes me. So I created this whole experience for her where she saw I'm fun to be around. Everyone, or people generally have a really good time when they're around me. And the barista was really nice, and she offered us these cake pops, and she said we could have them for free. She actually said we could have whatever we want. I took the cake pops, and when I stood up to go get them, she picked up a FaceTime call, and she was on the phone for maybe, I don't know, I saw her pick it up. I didn't really know what she was doing, but I was getting the cake pops for maybe 30 seconds to a minute. I came back. I gave, just because I was, I wasn't sure. I didn't understand the situation. I gave her another 30 seconds to a minute to get off. I think I even said, when I realized she was on the FaceTime, I turned to the phone. I said, she has a really hot date she doesn't want to screw up with. Okay, she's going to call you back. And I was saying that as a joke, but still laying down like the law of the land. You're not to do that with me. But when she stayed on, I figured, oh shit, maybe it's important. Maybe it's a work call or something. So I just backed off. And then when I realized she was just talking to one of her girlfriends, and then she went with so let me tell you what happened. And I realized she was not, that's what she said to her friend. And that's when I realized she's not getting off anytime soon. I just got up and I said, it was really nice meeting you. I'm going to head out of here. And I grabbed my coat and I started walking out. I didn't need to be an asshole there and tell her how rude that was. I'm not there to parent her. If she's not, if she didn't get that was a problem, especially after I kind of made it clear, through just playfully saying, look, she has a date she doesn't want to screw up with. She still didn't get off. That to me was a big indicator that this girl just doesn't get it. And that's very often what I even do with girls, is just, I very often talk to them and see how they respond, see what they do. I'm kind of testing them and seeing in the long run, or even for that night, whatever I want, how are they behaving? Are they behaving like someone who I would want to hang out with, or would I want to spend my time with? And when she was proving that she didn't want to, I got up and I was getting ready to leave, and she stopped me. She fought for me. And, and I wanted to introduce that to let guys know who are listening to this. Yes, I don't think there's anything wrong with being nice, but you can't be a pushover. And same thing, it's important to be a little bit edgy, but you can't be a dick, I heard some other guys say this, like what women want is a nice guy with a little bit of edginess where he sets his boundaries and they're not to be fucked with. And that was pretty big. I actually, to be honest, forgot how we got into this, but um, I guess to end that is it's important to be nice and respectful to what she wants, and letting her know that there's no harm with her hanging out with you whatsoever. That everything in her time with you is going to be really nice, really pleasant, and she just can't fuck up. You do have boundaries. You're still a human being.
I think one of the trends these days in terms of the new style of pickup or of meeting women is basically just teaching guys to be normal.
Oh yeah.
And I think a lot of guys are, used to reading so much material that gives them all these ideas and techniques and lines and things like this that uh, I think that a big part of everything is just being normal, and that's I guess if you're not normal, I'm curious how you teach someone to be normal.
Yeah, for sure. It's really important, to get to that point where basically, you could be in a position where you know what needs to be done and how to go for those makeouts, and how to ask, say what you want to say. And at first, it's going to be a little bit weird adjusting to that point where it's not so much what you're doing, it's more of just kind of who you are and how you behave. And I think the biggest way to do that is to spend some time, in all honesty, it's a growing period, and spend some time learning how to, go for those makeouts, hold her hand for a few minutes and walk with her, lead her places. And then the moment you kind of understand how to do that, drop it, like stop learning this stuff and just going back to being yourself, being who you were kind of before pickup, but with a whole new set of habits and mindsets. And I think it's kind of a funny way of looking at that saying. You may have heard of it, where they say, you get where you want to go by realizing you were already there. And so a lot of what this is going to be doing is teaching you how to get out of your own way. It's very normal that, like, if you think about it, what happens? You're with the girl and all of a sudden you get the idea to make out with her and you don't do it. But it was normal in your mind. You knew that was the time and you didn't do it. And if you think about it, if you would have just gotten out of your own way, you would have just gone for it. It was normal to begin with. You just stopped it, and you were, quote unquote, already there. You just, needed to show yourself. You needed to go through months of practicing exercises to realize that it's okay. You've proven to yourself. That's where I think reference experience is important. I'm not saying to clarify from before, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm saying it's important in the right context. And you've shown yourself through reference experience that it's okay that when you're with the girl that you like and you go for a makeout, they like it. They appreciate it. And if they somehow don't, you know how to back off, say, I'm sorry, I thought you were into it. Hey, look, if you're not into it, I could always leave, and being able to recognize when it's okay to move it forward and how far you could push it. And also when it's time to walk away and back off and give up. It's very, very important. I was talking to another guy about this. I feel like this is kind of a new idea that I've been playing around with. So it might sound a little bit sloppy, but there's two parts to succeeding, to getting the girls you want, in at least in this context. And one is knowing to not give up and to grow thick skin and to not back down and to persist, right? And the other one is knowing when to walk away and knowing when nothing's going to happen with this girl. So, the way this conversation was introduced was a lot of guys say, look, you don't want to just look for those girls who you meet them and all of a sudden they're down. They call them yes girls. And then there's those maybe girls, and then who are kind of on the fence, and then there's those no girls. And I think a really big skill in this is learning to recognize who are those girls that it's never going to happen with as quickly as possible without being so quick to walk away. On one hand, you want to walk away from those girls as quickly as possible, but you also need to be able to prove that. You also need to understand that it's really not going to happen. It's like, on one hand, you want to push to find out it's really a no, but on the other hand, you want to walk away as soon as possible. So it's like training yourself to realize when the no is truly a no and when it was just she's not ready. And that's a big part of this. It's a big part of it. And then learning how to recognize the girls who are into you, that they actually very much are into you, and then getting those girls who are on the fence about you to make a decision whether they're into you or not, very effectively, and not being the reason they walked away. They didn't walk away because you fucked up. You did everything you could, you did it properly, and you did it right. And she walked away purely because she wasn't into you, at that time. Maybe next year she'll be into you. Maybe you're both in different places in your life. She's not even necessarily better than you. It could be that she's, you're growing a company, and so that's what you're focusing on. And she's an art student, and she doesn't understand, economics or investing or anything like that. But the next year, when she has her own job and she has her own expenses, she might be able to relate to you a little bit better. So it's not even necessarily that there's anything wrong with you and that you fucked up. It's just a lack of compatibility, lack of relatability, and being able to recognize that and being able to be effective in identifying those girls and pushing the boundary really, to the point where you have a clear answer and it's not going to change, I think that's a big part of it. And then again, I think that's a new approach as well. You shouldn't, in my opinion, be trying to convert every single girl. If you're trying to have sex with as many girls as possible, great. If you're trying to get the girls you like, really a lot of this is going to be figuring out which girls would actually be happy with you. The way I learned this, and I think a way to really expand your abilities with women is to learn from other areas of your life. One of the ways I've learned this was I was growing a family company in a solar industry, and what we were realizing was a lot of people who were signing up with us. We had a sales team, and they were really good, and they were converting a lot of people. But what we started to realize was at some point we were converting people were buying because of the persistence and their ability to convince the customer in that moment it's a great idea, and it was good for them, but they weren't ready for it, and so they sold people who weren't ready to buy, and they should have never been buyers, because what they did was they drove the company crazy. And what really should have, and in the context of relationships, same thing. I mean, you might sleep with her, you might keep her around in your rotation, but she might drive you crazy. I mean, just because you can doesn't mean you should, that's another aspect to this. And that's, these kinds of things they're way more advanced of topics to introduce to a guy. And these are my favorite things to talk about. These actually do very much matter. And, they're really about making the right decisions, not necessarily even the easier one. And you could really very often only do those with guys who are, quote unquote, intermediate or advanced, teaching them how to not necessarily follow what you think you're supposed to do, but follow what makes sense and what you actually want to do, and helping people realize that and decide that for themselves. And yeah, that's definitely a big part. And I think that's, again, breaking away from being like quote unquote pickup artist where you're trying to convert every girl, and more about just trying to convert the girls you want to date and that you feel really great about being around and who genuinely appreciate you, that when you talk about what's important to you, they get it. They're not talking about, for example, I had to cut off a girl I really liked because when I would talk about things like business, which I'm fascinated by and I'm always working toward, I would tell her about like fears that I had, and she would start talking about things like The Walking Dead right after, as if I said nothing important. And it was, what was important to me was important to her, and it was just a clear difference in values and what we want out of life. And that I had to decide, can I be okay with her just not getting what's important to me? And the answer I came up with was honestly no. I'm not okay with it. It wasn't something I'd be thrilled to do. It wasn't a compromise I'd be thrilled to make to keep her around. So I ended it. And I think that's a big part of the maturity in this, and going back to just being a normal guy, as well as also realizing on another level that even if you're not good at this, even if you don't go out, even if you miss approaches, it doesn't affect who you are at all. You're still the same guy. You just didn't act on an opportunity. Doesn't mean if you bitch out, that's a totally different story. But if you realize, look, I'm in a different place in my life, or I have to get to a meeting, or I have a girlfriend now, it doesn't make you any less of a man. There's nothing wrong with it. You decided, to pass this one up. And I think that's another avenue of being a quote unquote natural and just a normal guy.
Let me ask you about your coaching, in the sense that I'm sure you run across a lot of similar sticking points and problems at areas that different guys have, and I'm sure there's a lot of commonality among that. What would you say is your specialty in terms of turning some of the more common sticking points around, and just pick one or two, and that here's this is a problem you see a lot, and that this is one that you've gotten a really good handle on turning around?
So to make sure I understand the question, it sounds like the question is, what are the more common sticking points that I find common that I like to solve?
More the ones that you're particularly successful in overcoming.
I got you. The biggest ones are that I'm pretty successful with is showing guys that interacting with these girls is really not that big of a deal. That nothing particularly crazy was exchanged. Some interactions are a little bit more crazy. That happens. Just kind of like when you go out with your friends, some conversations are a little bit more fun than others. But nonetheless, when you speak to them, it's all more or less the same. Like, there's more fun nights than others, and that's fine. And showing guys that, so that I really like showing guys. Again, this is not a big deal. It's not a big deal. You speaking to these girls and them speaking back to you, and without saying anything crazy, is not that big of a deal. And look how she made out with you anyway, kind of thing. Look how you overthought this whole situation and thought you had to say a really funny line, that you had to merge sets, and that you had to hit on another girl in front of her to make her jealous. And by the way, like, these are all, they could be really fun things to do when done properly. Like, you could tell the girl, hit on another girl in front of her and just watch her get a little bit jealous just to tease her. Kind of how, let's say, maybe you're with your buddies and one of your friends is trying to get your attention, you all deliberately ignore him just to joke around. Like, I'm not saying it happens all the time, but I think people get the idea that there's a certain element of teasing, and it's not necessarily meant to be malicious. You're just joking around and you're having a good time. And then you could always turn to the girl and say, hey, I was just kidding around. I actually really like hanging out with you. You're super cool. What are your plans for later on? We're having an after party in a little bit. It would be great to invite you. It would be great to have you. We're gonna have some drinks. I'm sure you drink, etc. Like, very casual. It's so not a big deal. And the other one is to show guys exactly what I just did, was how easy it is to casually invite the girl over without it sounding like a big deal. That is definitely my favorite things to teach guys, where it's to get her over is so not a big deal. It's not difficult at all. Saying things, another one which is very funny is for some, I get why, but it's wrong, where a lot of guys avoid saying things like, we're going to my apartment, because they think it sets off a red flag. And so what they try to do is say things like, oh, we're going right around the corner. There's a place right around the corner, and then they'll pull her to like a pizza, say they're going to a pizza store when really they're going to their apartment. And I'm not saying that won't work, but that's kind of like, it's funny how, that seems to be like the plan A. And when I introduce guys, plan A is to pull her to your apartment. Plan B is to pull her to the pizza store and then get her closer to your apartment, where you could kind of get her in the motion of leaving with you and walking with you in a direction. And then you could stop for pizza and you go to your apartment, or you could, technically you could even change plans and say, you know what, we're already on our way. Let's just stop by my apartment. There's free food there. We won't even have to wait in line, etc. And explaining to guys, look, when you say we're going to my apartment, it sounds way less weird than if you were saying, oh, we're just going to some place, and then switching it on her. When you're being vague and you're not being clear about your plan, it oftentimes is going to set off way more red flags than if you just said, hey, we're going to my apartment, and saying it as if it's completely normal and there's nothing wrong with it and there's nothing to be worried about, because there isn't. It's all very well intentioned. And the funny thing is, when you say it like that, you're kind of almost assuming, when you avoid saying things like her apartment, you're almost assuming that women don't want sex, like as if she would never put herself in a situation where sex could happen. It's not true. They will all the time. They just very often don't want to put themselves in this situation where sex has to happen, where if they back out at the last second, and we've all had this, where, the girl's clothing is off and she decides, you know what, I'm not comfortable with this anymore. And you're like, no, but it was supposed to happen. We agreed. We said, we were coming here to hook up. And like, that's what she's trying to avoid. She's okay with it, putting herself in the situation where it might happen, but she's not okay with putting herself in the situation where it has to happen. And that's why, when you invite her over and she says things like, look, I'm not, just because I'm coming doesn't mean I'm having sex with you. And a great response for that is saying, look, nothing has to happen, and that's when very often they're gonna be like, okay, cool. At least he gets that, if it's okay if it happens, but that it doesn't have to happen, that there's no pressure, there's no commitment, there's no contract, no one's gonna get yelled at or upset, and that's what they're really trying to avoid, is the awkward situation of, if they're no longer ready, if they're not as ready as they think they are, that they're, that there's going to be a problem. I think, my mind is very much like business and women, so it's kind of the way I think. And it's funny, I think everyone can relate to this as well. You would never go to a store, even if you like the store, if you knew that every time you went there, like the sales reps there would be pissed off that you didn't buy. You want to go and you want to browse and you put yourself in the situation where you could buy, but you're not ever going to go there if you knew that they would pressure you, that they would try to manipulate you, that if you started to say, look, I can't afford this, then they would start trying to, fuck around with your finances and saying how it's not a big deal. Don't worry, you're going to spend, you do this all the time. It doesn't matter. Like the moment she says, look, I'm not ready, same way you wouldn't want to be pressured by a salesman, that it's totally not a big deal. And if you don't want to buy, that's fine. I think it would be great for you. I think, same way she might say that the shirt looks damn good on you. It's unfortunate you don't want to buy it, but hey, I get it. It's not, it's not for everyone. Not everyone wants to buy a damn good shirt, and realizing that it's not a big deal, and somebody else will happily sleep with you and realize that. as long as, again, they will happily sleep with you as long as you create those situations enough times, which again aren't that hard. It's just a very overcomplicated process. And that's what I like to do, is simplify it for them and show them this is actually quite simple. So when I show text messages, that was pretty easy, right? I didn't say anything that fancy. I didn't do anything that crazy. Look how consistently I could do this, and try to make the process a little bit more simple for guys, rather than giving them a million more steps to worry about mastering before they could be cool, or before they could get that 10, quote unquote,
Okay, well, I think I'd like to ask you to take a few minutes now and tell the guys about what you have, I guess, available for anybody who would like to learn more from you. Tell us a little bit about what coaching you offer, your boot camps, any products you have. Let's get a little information on what they could follow up with.
Yeah, sure. So I offer, as of right now, a variety of programs depending on the person. I love long-term coaching because I could take a guy, not only teach him how to bring girls home in a single night of meeting them, and teach them how to do that over a weekend, which I think I could show them in a weekend. It also takes some time for them to refine that and keep making it better. That takes some time, and I like showing them that. But I also like showing them overall, like helping transform them to that cool person that they want to be, where they're charismatic everywhere they go. For example, as I was saying on that date, yeah, I was able to attract that girl, but I was also able to make everyone there like me. The gay guy next to me, who actually ended up helping me with the girl. The barista made me look really good. She offered us free food. And teaching guys how to really do that consistently, where you go there and you're welcomed and you're greeted. I go to the best venues in New York City, and I'm welcome there whether or not I have girls, and and I get free bottle service, skip the lines, and in many of the clubs. And it's really cool to learn how to do that where you value it. Learning how to do that at your local coffee shop or wherever. And so I love those long-term clients, but I understand that most people don't have that option. A lot of people live outside New York. A lot of people don't have the money. So for those guys who do have the money, and that really want to take this to the next, to a really very cool level, I'd love to extend my services for you if you could take this very seriously. And for those guys who don't have that option because they live out of state, they don't have the financial means, a great option would be like the 3-day program that I like to offer, where it's pretty customized to you. You saw, as I was doing with the students that were on my program, I spent a lot of time with prepping them. I spent a lot of time giving them individual work to do and things to practice, as opposed to just saying, hey guys, we're doing this tonight, and and see how they do. It was very much customized. And then even later on in the breakdown of the analysis of what happened, explaining to them what they could do better, where they screwed up, where they did really well. It's very customized to them, and it kind of like fits them and it's just so like the analysis is so accurate to where they are, and then with the customized plan of getting them where they want to go. And so those are great options, the 3-day programs. The only difference is on a long-term program, I could actually walk you through that plan that's customized toward where you want to go. And so that's fantastic. There's also going to be, in the upcoming weeks, I'm going to be releasing a product. Well, in the upcoming months, there's going to be a full product. So the daytime, meeting women in the daytime specifically, because again, even though it's the same type of, you have to have the same mentality of how to solve problems in general. The problems you're going to come across with in the daytime are different than that of the nighttime very often. And so it's just because she's dealing with different things throughout the day. And so I'm going to be releasing an overall comprehensive program for online daytime, creating a high quality lifestyle for yourself, texting girls, the nighttime, etc. But in the upcoming weeks, I'm working with my team pretty hands-on to get the nighttime release, so guys could understand how these 5-minute interactions happen. And it's going to be customized for a lot of different levels. So like we talked about, getting you from like the newbie kind of stage to, a stage, give them exercises to work on. And then once you could get to that, how to really take you from those base level conversations where you could have with anyone, and teaching you how to actively get the girls that you want in so much, a fraction of the time it took myself, a fraction of the time it took my friends. I mean, we really put a lot of time and money into it, and you'll be able to benefit from that in so much less effort and trial and error. It's pretty amazing. And so aside from that, for guys who, don't have that ability, I do offer 5 and 10 hour Skype phone consultations. I used to do 1 hour and 25 hours. I just do 5 and 10. I'm more I was pre-med when I was in school. I was studying to be a doctor, and one of the biggest things I found very important was to offer solutions rather than just kind of treat an issue. I always felt that the doctors that were always the best were the ones that were able to get rid of the patient as quickly as possible. The ones who didn't need you coming back over and over and over. And so I feel like solving one problem is such a Band-Aid solution, and it doesn't allow me to do for you what I know needs to be done for you. So I don't do the 1 hours anymore. I do 5 and I do 10, and there will be options for guys who want to go past that, but minimum is 5. And all those are available. You could add me on Facebook, Chris Parker. You could go to my my website, chrisparkernyc.com. There's going to be YouTube videos, but there's a lot of free content out there for guys who just aren't in the position to benefit from the really customized programs where I can walk you through your issues. And I have really a lot of testimonials backing the value. I helped one guy recently get past the breakup that he had. He couldn't get over it for 1.5 years. In a couple hours, I walked him through it, and it was amazing to see how he how I was able to walk him through that. It doesn't necessarily happen every time, but there's a lot of things I do know how to do, and those are the problems I like to solve because I personally firsthand experience them. So I would say if you're looking and you're very, very serious, I will bust my ass to help you, but you got to be very, very serious yourself, and I'd be so happy to get you on a program, get you to a position where you're, if not where you need to be, very, very damn close to it. And definitely as close as you're going to get in that time. It's going to be pretty amazing. I'm pretty excited. And, I'm sure there'll be also ebooks. A lot of guys have been asking me to put together ebooks for my text sequence. I mean, there's got to be, I never really broke it down, so I got to do it soon. But explaining to guys, when it's okay to, let's say, push it a little bit farther, to be a little bit more sexual, to back off and build some connection. I have some cool examples. One off the top of my head is I got a girl recently send me a lot of really a lot of naked pictures and things like that, just by sending her my books, my pictures of my books, my bookcase. It was very funny how I set it up. And so a lot of guys look at that and they really want to be able to do things like that themselves. So an ebook will probably be out in the upcoming future. So stay tuned for that as well. And more or less, that's what I have to offer for today.
So they would get in touch with you on your website. What's the address?
Chris Parker, NYC, ChrisParkerNYC.com. And you could also email me at chrisparkernyc@gmail.com. I answer within maybe a few hours, sometimes a day, but pretty quickly.
Well, that was great. I want to mention also to anybody who does follow up with Chris and buy something from him, that if you email him and me, I will send you as an extra bonus a free Cliffs List product, just as a thank you for having found out about Chris through Cliffs List and followed up on it. Chris, I want to thank you very much for taking the time with me today. I think it was very informative. I think you shared a lot of good information, and I think you should be finding a lot of guys that will want to follow up with this because you have the secret sauce.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. It's always great to be able to walk guys through things that I had such a pain in the ass walking through, and being able to show them that it's simple, and that it kind of makes me feel like what I went through had so much more of an impact than just myself. It was actually able to help other people as well. So that's always a really, really great feeling. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting any of you guys on program. Yeah, and looking forward to hearing from you guys.
Great. Thanks again.
Sure.